The views and opinions expressed here are those of the interviewees and do not reflect the views of Fermanagh and Omagh District Council. Any content provided by contributors is of their own opinion and is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organisation, company, individual, anyone or anything. These recollections are for entertainment purposes only and offer a historical window into Omagh's past.
I'm going back to Omagh to walk her streets again. I'll tip my hat to all the girls, shake hands with all my friends. I'll climb aboard the silver bird that flies across the foam. I'm on my way to Omagh in the county of Tyrone.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our little Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio podcast.
Yes, and we are celebrating the Omagh Music Festival, which takes place from Thursday the 29th of September until Sunday the 2nd of October. And we have a series of podcasts, and tonight's podcast, Donald, is a very, very special one because we have an interview with the one and only
Frank Chisum.
And in the podcast, he talks of his memories of growing up in Omagh, his musical career, and a very, very entertaining gentleman. I love doing the interview.
He talks so much about his life growing up in Omagh, being born in Gortrush Park and then working in the garage trade, working in the bands and the music scene right round his long, varied career.
Yeah, and it's a great insight into that whole world of music and entertainment. And so, I mean, all I can say is, take it away, Frank.
Yes, indeed. If you want to comment on these programmes, we have a new phone number, and it's 0756 001296, or contact us on Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio. Get us on YouTube if you wish.
The original Showband was Clipper Carlton, because back then every dance was 9 to 2. That was 5 hours. 5 hours playing. And it used to be great when the boy who owned the hall said, "Lads, is your time enough starting the night at 9:10? Big deal." So the Clipper Carlton got wise, and during the 5 hours they would do wee sketches. Laurel and Hardy, and they were very, very talented musicians, never mind. But these boys could have been on the stage, you know, or in a movie, because they were so talented with all these wee sketches through the night, which broke up the 5 hours. And then when I played with the Melody Aces for a while, which superb musicians, nice people, and I learnt a lot from them as well. But one of the things I remember, we played in a hall called the Oyster Ballroom in Drumkeen, 3,000 people on a Sunday night at I think 2 and 6 a head. And halfway through, some of the band went down for a cup of tea, and there was normally sandwiches, and it was quite nice, and then you went up and did a bit in this. But if you ever played in a marquee down south, say there was a festival on, you had the marquee running for a fortnight, and normally before the gig you were to come up to somebody's house for tea and the salad and all this. So when the woman was making the tea, you lifted the side of the ham with the knife. Joe Dolan says hello. The other one, Dickie Rock, was here. The Melody Aces, because they weren't going to throw out the ham, because the thing was running for a fortnight. So if you were there maybe midweek and you just, it didn't do you damn bit of harm, but this was the way it was.
Staple diet, was it?
You see, and if you were talking to regular people, shall we say, those things didn't happen. Hold on a minute, I was there, I was one of them. Hello, and that was the way it was. I never saw a kettle this big. It must have had about 5 gallons of tea, you know. and you didn't go hungry anyway. And then that's where the real show band came out, was the Clipper Carlton. They did a show as well as the band. And then probably later on down the road, the boys just concentrated on the musical end, you know.
Yeah.
Now the Melody Aces could have played Dixieland as good as any of the American heads. They were superb at that. And the Clippers, they were way out of the posse. Definitely were.
And their songs, were they doing a lot of American songs? Or?
All the covers, whatever was in the charts, they would have covered it. Don't forget, back then, take the Clippers, everybody in the Clippers could sing. There was no passengers, you know, you doubled up. These boys were way out of the posse. And if it was Roy Orbison, if it was Elvis, Johnny Cash, Slim Whitman, whoever, that was it. And if it was a girl in the band, she had been doing some of the girl singers, Patsy Cline back then. They covered everything. And some of the bands were really very, very good. The Dixies were a very, very good band.
And did the bands put their own stamp on it, or did they think, well, I'm going to have to sound like Johnny Cash, or I have to sound like Slim Whitman?
Well, that was the idea, you know, to be as near as you can, you know. So, and anybody who took on that particular song, I mean, they did a real good job on it, make no mistake. There was some superb talent about. But again, a lot of the bands, the so-called managers, you know, the bands weren't treated fairly. But anyway, that was that. And then I got a job with the Royal Show Band for a while. That was an experience. I was based in Dublin, and we played the first night. It was New Year's Eve night in the ballroom in Waterford. Boyer had formed the Big Eight and went to the States and all that. That was nice. Then I formed a band called the Top Seven. It was a country band. I learnt a lot from two people in that. One was a steel player called Basil Henricks, an English lad. Taught me a lot about light and shade and how to phrase this and phrase that. The guy was superb. A young lad then called John Feely. He was from Ballinasloe, guitar player. He went on to become a classical teacher in Memphis. A superb player. Oh, Basil Henricks taught me one thing. Taught me a lot, but one thing sticks out. I was a big Merle Haggard fan back then. And one of the songs was called Every Fool Is a Rainbow. And there was an augmented lick in the middle. Beautiful piece. And I had played it. And Basil says, Chizzy, that's note perfect, but that piece should be felt rather than played. Basil, I don't understand. I'll show you. Here's yours, note perfect. Now here's it felt. Wow. The guy was way ahead. So I learnt a lot, you know, back then. And after the band scene then went back to the Pebbles. Pebbles was a three-piece group. Desi Stewart, Seamus Morgan and myself. And that was nice too. He covered all the songs.
Well, what age were you when you decided to take up music as a potential career?
As a career, I'd have been 25, 26, and we were still doing a bit with the group. And then somebody said, why did you do sort of a mini Elvis show? So, forget about it. I'm happy enough doing what I'm doing. But then we used to play Eddie McGinn's on a Wednesday or a Saturday night. And if you weren't in at 8:30, you didn't get a seat. That was it. And the request came up. We did one Elvis number. It was called The Love Machine. And a nice bouncy thing. And the request would come up, do the Elvis song again. Do the Elvis song again. So we did it again and again. And then them days, the hair was a bit longer. I had hair then, and sideburns and all this. So we did one session one night in Eddie McGinn's a long time ago. Anyway, the thing, Seamus Morgan says, why don't we do an Elvis spectacular? I said, are you out of your mind? So I need to get a suit and all this stuff. So, whoa. So one thing went on and on and on. So we did one show in the Berlin Basket, and we were all sitting around in the house having a coffee and waiting to see what was going to happen. The phone rang, and somebody on the phone says, "You need to get up here soon." And this was about, 10 past 8, and we weren't due on to 10 o'clock. He says, "There's as many from the chapel down, and there's as many from the bottom up looking to get in." Wow. So the place was black, and things was a bit rough and ready back then until we got our act together, so to speak. But then it went on from one thing to another. And then we were looking for a bass player, actually, because other lad had to leave. So we were up in Enniskillen, I think in the Killyhaviland Hotel, doing interviews for bass players. A few guys that weren't what I was looking for. And the last minute, this lad, big lanky lad, walked in with his hair sort of wet. He says, "I'm very sorry, I was doing a bit of drama there." He says, "My name's Eddie Dunbar." I says, "Listen, the bass playing wouldn't be that great and the voice, but," he says, "I would need the job." So that'll do me. I liked him because he was honest and he was straight up. And we became very good friends. And then we went to the States together with a show, and it was superb. We hired a limo because some of the guys didn't get on the first plane, they had to come on the second one. So Dunbar said to me, "What would it take to hire a limo just for the hell of it?" It's not good enough. It was $60 for 4 hours with the guy with the peak cap and the whole works. And we pulled up at Kennedy Airport, and Dunbar had the shades on like the Blues Brothers and the Slim Jim tie, opened the door, and I had a pink jacket and all this carry on. And he was telling the people to get back because they were taking photos and all this. And Dunbar played the part really well. So that was the start of it. And I knew back then that there was something different about Eddie, you know. Yeah. We were sitting in Dublin in Hawkins Street trying to get out with the van. And there was a young guard standing over in the corner watching the whole plant. Eddie got out of the van, went over, had a few words with the young guard, took off his hat, put it on himself, stood out in the street and stopped the traffic and let the van out. Went over and put the hat back on the guard, and the guard just folded his arms and shook his head. And only Eddie would have got away with that. So I knew, yes. And I watched him develop into the star he is today. And one of the things I would like before I shuffle off the mortal coil would be to meet Eddie one more time, shake his hand, and personally thank him for every time since he had a chance on TV, radio, or in the press. He always mentioned me. He never, ever forgot. And I would like to thank him personally. Because, see, people just think that Eddie was just an actor. Eddie co-wrote Hear My Song, you know, with Joseph Lockyer, you know, a very talented fellow, and he has a super voice developed as well. And
a great actor.
Oh, I mean, for me personally, I'm so proud to have known him and to watch him develop, you know. Mm-hmm. So maybe it'll happen, you know.
There's no doubt it will, Frank, no doubt.
Whereabouts in the States did you go, Frank, then? Did you?
We played a place in the Bronx called Dirty Nelly's. It was spelled D-U-R-T-Y. There's a place the same of it outside Limerick. That's right. Dirty Nelly's. And a fella called Phil Delaney. He was from Tipperary originally. Super fella. And we played there for 6 weeks. I nearly got fired out of the job when I came back because I told him I was only going for 4. So anyway, that was an experience, you know.
Well, the whole Elvis experience, it must have been so different from the Royal Showband, which would have been so different from Pebbles and from...
Just when you mentioned that, when the show was up and starting to, take shape, because we had to get the thing together right, and we were invited to do a show in the De Montfort Hall in Leicester. And this was organised by the official Elvis fan club of Great Britain. And the guy who was the president was a guy called Todd Slaughter, who knew Elvis. And to be asked to do that, wow, this was something else. And when we went over there to do it, we landed there about 6 in the evening. And at that stage, they were queued right round the whole place on both sides. And who was on doing relief or supporting us was the original Searchers that I saw in Carrickmore years and years before that for about 6 shillings on a Sunday night. And we did the show, and it was amazing toward the end, because back then the impersonators weren't looked upon with much favour, but for some reason they liked what we were doing. And at the end, when I was doing Trilogy, they had their lighters and all this, the whole place going. I think there were about 2,000 people in the place. It was an amazing experience, and one thing led to another, and then I used to ring Jerry Anderson in Radio Foyle. Jerry and I became good friends, and I came down and did a few bits in the radio, and there was a man there called Tommy Kelly, I think it was, and Tommy used to do this south of the border. Tommy was a character, superb, really nice person. And Jerry says to me when we're walking out of the studio, he says, Chisum, I'm going on holidays in a fortnight's time. I want you to do Monday and sit in for me in my show. I said, Jerry, are you serious? I'm deadly serious. Coyle will be there to help you. Said, good enough. And to be asked to do that on Jerry Anderson's show, wow. If Jerry liked you, that was it. And if he didn't, forget it. Mm-hmm. So I went on the Monday and did the show, and it was superb. The big clock watching the time, And Coyle, I always called him Young Coyle. He could mimic Daniel O'Donnell. You'd have swore Daniel O'Donnell was sitting beside you. Very gifted people about there,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when he came back from holidays, he rang me and said, listen, many thanks. By the way, he says, there might be a TV show in the pipeline. And if I get it, he says, I'll give you a shout. He was a man of his word. So many, was it months or so later, I says, Friday night, next week, will you come up? It's not good enough. What time? He says, need to be there, was it Blackstaff? I think you called it, 12 o'clock. So Friday night happened to be the 8th of January, which was Elvis's birthday. See, some things were meant to be. And when you hear what I have to tell you, you'll say yes. So we landed up and got sound organised, and sound man called Joe Clark from Showbands, who was very good. And the guy had just got a new desk in for BBC, and he wasn't so sure. So Jerry says to me, what about your sound man? So the two guys got on, and we picked out a number called The Wonder of You, because there's a guitar lick in the middle. So I was able to go down with the scarves, etc., etc. So during the rehearsal, I couldn't hear the guitar lick on the monitor. Joe, I needed more monitor for the guitar lick. So that's it there, wee bit more. And then I heard this voice saying, hey Chisum, you're far too fussy. And the lights in the studio, and out of the darkness walked these two people, Jerry Anderson and Charlie Hodge. And for the people who don't know, Charlie Hodge was the guy who put on Elvis's scarves, sang harmony, played guitar, give him the water. Wow. Jerry Anderson smiled. He flew that guy over from the States on that Friday. Jerry done his homework. He knew it was Elvis's birthday. and I was to meet Charlie Hodge.
Oh.
And
I remember that. I watched that. I remember it was the Jerry Anderson show.
that's true.
Yeah.
Friday night one, yeah.
Yeah.
And my daughter Karina, she was back and singing with another girl, Michelle Forbes, great singer. And during the guitar lick, I went down with a few scarves. And for some reason, I said, I'll put one on Charlie. So I went over to put the scarf on Charlie. Charlie stood up and said, hold it, I'm the one who puts on the scarves. So I put the scarf on me. I thought nothing about it, went back on, finished the gig, blah, 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 and talked to Charlie afterwards and shot the breeze in the green room. And then this woman said, there's a phone call for you from Dublin. And it was the roadie in Dublin, when we were down there, a guy called Tom O'Mahony. And he was on the phone, he was shrieking. Said, Mahoney, what is wrong? Do you realise that history's been made tonight? What are you talking about? You're the only person in the world at this moment in time that got a scarf put on by Charlie Hodge. He says that should be in the Guinness Book of Records. Well, back then, I wasn't thinking too much about Guinness Book of Records and what. The show went well. I met Charlie Hodge. And chatted this, that, and on, and that was a biggie,
Yeah.
So Jerry Anderson did me a major favour, I loved him for that. And then I had Joe McCadden was managing the band at that stage, and Joe was well got about RTE, very well got. So we were he asked me to do a thing that was called Name That Tune, the version of it. And who was I paired up with? Jerry Lee Lewis. And RTE orchestra pianist was on the far side with some other person. And Jerry Lee Lewis turned around and looked at me and said, I know you. And that's all he said. He didn't say much. But boy, could he play. So we did this thing anyway, and afterwards, when all was said and done, he said to me, are you around for a bit? I said, why? We sing a few songs. If RTE had been tuned in, that's the part that they should have taped. Me and him sitting, him singing, I would sing a verse and this and that. Oh, stop. What a player. And I remember that. So along the way, a whole lot of nice things happened.
Wow.
How did you find Jerry Lee Lewis as a character?
Very, it'd be unfair to say strange, but and then I met him once again up in Belfast. We're done the Jerry Kelly show. He didn't like Jerry Kelly for some reason. He got up off the seat that night and took the mic off and over to the piano and started to play. See, them shows were live. There was no pre-recording, so arts and all. But he was up in the green room, and he turned around to me and he says, I know you. That's all he ever said to me, I know you. A strange character, but anybody I found who was that talented, they were wrapped up in their own thing. They weren't too...
Their own universe.
Yes, they weren't too, how can I... They weren't... it would be wrong to say that they weren't friendly, but don't forget, Jerry Lee Lewis, a legend in his own time, and still playing at 80-something years of age.
Yeah.
Wow. But if he was sitting here now with us, he'd be very restless, and he wouldn't be chatting much. He'd be looking around for a piano,
That's right, yeah.
That was the type of person he was.
Yeah.
But superb player.
Unreal.
And then one thing happened. Some dreams do come true, and one came true for me. I said before I go to meet St. Peter, I said I would love my daughter Karina. She sings with the group, so I want Karina on my left, the old man in the middle, and Gareth, my son, on my right. And I think Angela and Karina had played a part in this, because I was talking to Gareth and I was mentioning what would be the chance you could come over, son. He lives over in Devil's Bridge in Wales. Dad, he says, sometime in May maybe. Which I was chuffed, but I said, normally Gareth said, Dad, I'm busy with the sheep, etc. So I went to say, what date, son? Maybe the 20th, which was a Friday night. So I went to Colin in Broderick's, and Colin has treated us so well over the years. Genuine fella, no messing. He says, you can have the Friday night. He says, money, he says, I know, this one's on us, no charge. My son Gareth's coming over, etc. So I was like a child waiting on Santa Claus, you know. That's the way I felt. And my son landed over on the Thursday, stayed with me in my place, and he brought his father-in-law, Peter Davis. Peter had celebrated his 80th birthday a fortnight beforehand. He was never in Ireland in his life to that day. Fell in love with Ireland. So that night on the Friday, we were at the rehearsal, and Gareth was on my right playing. And I think we'd done a simple one, just Bobby McGee to get us kicked off. And my daughter on my left. And John Kerwin keeping his everything in shape. And I can say this, if I had won the lotto that night, I couldn't have felt any happier and proud as punch that this old man and his daughter and his son on the same stage playing. You know, as far as I was concerned, it doesn't get much better than that. And for me, that was the biggie, you know. All them things people have mentioned was lovely things to have happened, nice things to happen to me.
Yeah.
But that was really nice there, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever meet any of the Elvis's band, like James Burton and these guys, or the TCB
No,
band?
I was never so lucky. Never so lucky. Charlie Hoyes was the closest I got.
Yeah.
Oh, aye. Charlie then, I meant to tell you, when we finished the rehearsal, the producer came over to me and he gave me £50. He says, Charlie wants to go to a famous pub in Belfast, I think it's called The Crown. Will you take him up there? I said, well, don't let him get too pissed, like you love. And Charlie Hoyes was a comedian. I was in tears laughing, telling me about Elvis and about things he did. And, you know, but Charlie Hoyes was a superb singer in his own right. You know, he just wasn't a backing singer. Superb artist in his own. And he did some shows, you know, and did his own version of different songs. Superb singer. Very gifted man, you know. But I would love to have met all the band. Sweet Inspirations, J.D. Sumner, Stamps Quartet, James Burton, and Jerry Schiff on bass, and one of the most talented piano players back then was a man called J.D. Harden. J.D. Harden did all the arrangements.
Did he? Right.
And anybody in that band was
top drawer stuff.
You know. And
what do you call the drummer? Was it Tut?
Ronnie Tutt.
Ronnie Tutt, the drummer, yeah, I've never seen him.
Ronnie Tutt passed away there, and I saw Joe Esposito. Joe Esposito was his roadie.
Yeah.
Joe was talking about how sick Elvis really was at the end, you know. There was one concert, and he shouldn't have been let on the stage because the man was not well. It was the last one in 1977, and Charlie Hoyes was holding the microphone for him, and he was sitting at the piano, but the voice never let him down, you know. But the man was not well.
And then he was practically helped up
He
from the
was,
piano.
yes,
taken
because...
out. And he was, you know, he just...
But you see, he had a twisted colon, he had high blood pressure, and all these things, and, you know, for the amount of energy required to do a show. Like, I remember our show was 2 hours, and you had different changes and this and that and on, and I was blessed that I could sing every song in the same key except Jailhouse Rock. Jailhouse Rock, he did it in E, it was a tone above C, for me for C, but the rest, thank God, I could do them in the same key. And there's a young lad from Strabane called Ronan Doherty, a trombone player, superb player, and he did all the arrangements, wrote them all out for anybody in the brass section. And looking back on it, it was nice to be part of the Elvis scene back then, but I was in it at the right time, you know, and the thing was hot. As Jerry Reed's song says, when you're hot, you're hot. So it was nice to be part of that, you know.
Yeah. Did Charlie Hodge mention the Colonel at all? Can you remember?
Didn't like the Colonel. The band didn't like the Colonel at all because the Colonel was strictly dollars. He didn't care if Elvis was good, bad or indifferent. You get on that stage. And the reason that the Colonel owed the hotel a fortune because he thought he was a gambler. Like myself, he couldn't play snap, you know, but as long as Elvis was on the stage, the money was rolling. And then a pitiful sight of the Colonel then after it was all, after the days in the sunshine were over, he was helping people into the hotel for his board, you know. Not a nice person.
No.
See, he was an immigrant, and if he had went out of the States, that's why Elvis never toured out of the States.
Yeah.
If he had went out, he would never get back in again. You know?
Right.
He was a man of mystery, wasn't he?
Well, he was, because nobody really knew where he came out of, and very secretive, but his whole thing was strictly dollars. And only one time that Elvis said, hold on, Colonel, you know. Jerry Reed was asked to do, how would he like to help Elvis with certain songs Jerry Reed wrote. And he went to the studio and the Colonel came over and said, by the way, here's the way we do it here, and the song writes. He said, hold on, Colonel. I've lost a fortune, I've made another fortune. You can go to hell, he says. I don't really need you or your money. And the Colonel, Elvis said, Colonel, give the man the money. I need him to play because Jerry Reed's playing for Guitar Man, that sort of stuff. Nobody could play like him. James Burton says that style is totally different. I couldn't play like that. So you get James Burton or get Jerry Reed. So Jerry Reed come in, Elvis and him clicked straight away. And that was it. And Jerry Reed came to a sad end. The man, he was smoking a lot of cigarettes every day, and he wound up with emphysema, but a superb talent.
Oh.
You seen him on Smokey and the Bandit, and that was his biggest song. Was called Eastbound and Down.
Yeah.
And the lick he played, and he played it live with another guitar player playing the harmony. Oh, stop, blow you away.
When the Elvis thing kicked off, did you have to immerse yourself in Elvis and get as many films as you could or recordings so that it sort of sank up here?
Well, back then, there wasn't any live videos of Elvis, what he did. There was live records. And I would listen to the live recordings and try and picture what was going on stage.
Yeah.
And I had no illusions about who I was. Mm-hmm. And there was one guy on some radio station in Dublin said to me, now, you must be, at some stage, you must have thought you were Elvis. And I said, I can't believe you're after coming out with that statement. So a man of your intelligence said, I'm very happy being me. He said, I was playing a part on stage like an actor. That's all it is. He said, I'm playing a part. But since I have a wife and a family and I love salmon fishing, says I do my thing on stage and that's it. I drive the van, says I, as well, and I repair it if it needs to be repaired. And the people were ringing in, giving out about this so-called interviewer, trying to be a smart arse, So he said, if you have any final words, says I, yes, let me tell you this, the easiest thing in life to be is oneself. That's it. Oh, God love them,
It was the people in the audience who thought you were Elvis.
Well,
what do you think of it?
The way I looked at it, if for a few hours those people, husbands, wives, or whatever, boyfriends, girlfriends, mothers, fathers, whatever, children, for a few hours they were immersed in what the Elvis thing would have been like if I had been Elvis on stage. So I was like an actor playing a part. They were into it, they enjoyed the music, and they had a visual thing of what it might have been like. So they were very happy about that.
It was certainly a great stage show.
Unreal. There's nothing no ever like it since either, that's for sure now. No.
Well, we played 14 seasons in O'Gorman Arms. And the years went on, and we never thought much about it. But you add 14 years on to the people who were there, a kid at 5 years of age. We brought them up on the stage for Daddy Big Boots with the GI, and that was the biggie on a Thursday night. All the families brought in the kids. Funny thing, when we landed first in O'Gorman Arms, Frank Gorman had the big sign outside, "Sorry, no children allowed." And before I set up the gear, I says, "Frank, this is a holiday resort, families. Say, the people's not going to leave their children sitting in the street to come in to listen to me." So I tell you what, take the sign down, and if it doesn't work, don't pay me. Forget about it. The sign went down, never went up again, because the place was jammed. And he said that he made more money on the Thursday night with all the kids drinking minerals and crisps and that. So, but then as the years went on, these children were suddenly young men and women. And then I have the photographs when they had their own family, and they were bringing them along to see their Elvis, you know.
Oh my God.
So it was a lovely feeling to be able to make some people happy, you know. And some kids were sitting up on the stage. And there was kids there in their mother's arms in the front of the stage, and them sound asleep or waking up, and they weren't scared of this strange creature in a white suit with a big cape, you know.
That's all.
Oh Lord, oh.
Oh dear. Did it become a millstone at times? Did you ever feel like, I want to do something, I want to sing other songs?
Yes, that came in. There was a song. It was a Beatles song, but it was actually covered by Mary Black's singer. Nollaig Bridgman was his drummer, and a superb voice, and he did the song, "Nothing's Going to Change My World." Wow. Mary Black brought him out from behind, and the fella, I thought, wow. He did a better version than the Beatles did it. This was really, so I thought, I'd like to do that song there. So we rehearsed it, and we did it. And there was murmurings in the crowd, you know, that's not an Elvis song. And I said, you know, if Elvis had been in Ireland, maybe he might have sang this, you know, so who knows. So, and I did another, which wasn't an Elvis song. And, here, hold on a minute. I heard Tom Jones doing a version of Noreen Bawn. So one night down in a place called Clontarf Castle was the biggie to play in Dublin. Dickie Rock, Boyer, all the gods played it. So Chisum was asked to do it. So I was going down the band, I said, boys, there's a song by Tom Jones, it's called Noreen Bawn. You listen to this, I think we should do this. But that's not an Elvis song. So I'm going to tell the audience, if Elvis had came to Ireland, this is one song he might have sang. So I'm going to sing it for you. So we sang it, brought the house down. But then the purists, that's not an Elvis song. I said, no, if you're going to do that, we're not coming back, you know. So you had to leave that to the one side. And the Elvis fans, you see, if they liked you, fine. If they didn't, oh. And Elvis impersonators were not well thought of back then, you know. But for some reason, I got away with it.
I remember you singing Noreen Bawn in the golf club in Omagh here.
Do you? No.
Absolutely. You know.
One thing comes to mind, that particular night we were in the golf club. Dr. Aidan Lagan, we became friends because there was a song back in the Pebbles days by Dean Martin called Gentle on My Mind. And I had to do that for Aidan Lagan if we were out doing the dining dance at Knocknamoe. And as long as I did that, Aidan was happy. So this night at the golf club, he came up during the show and he sat on a chair in the front of the stage with his bow tie, and he was sitting there like a schoolboy. So when the thing, next song, he says to me, will you do mine? I say, yes, Aidan, we'll do yours. I say, boys, you may wing it here. I say, Gentle on My Mind, size and D, okay? And he was sitting in the front of the stage and the tears were coming down his eyes. And he came up and he hugged me on the stage and he thanked me a million times. That was a really nice moment, you know.
Mm.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's true. I remember that so well, you know.
Is that a Glenn Campbell song? Was that the Glenn Campbell version? No.
Yeah, no. Dean Martin.
Dean Martin one.
Dean
Yeah.
Martin, you know, Dean Martin had this unique voice, so laid back. All he had to do was open his mouth and sing. It just came out of him natural, and it was that thing. Glenn Campbell made a version, but the original was Dean Martin. And whatever way Aidan Lagan honed in on this, and when I did it that night, I can see him yet, and the tears run down his cheeks.
Oh.
And it was really emotional because I felt it too, and he hugged me then, and the whole place applauded, you know.
Oh,
So it was nice to make. I was able to make people's night through the songs I was singing and wearing a suit, you know, and playing a part. Yeah. So that's what it came down to. But I had never any stage thinking that I was Elvis Presley. Yeah. No way. Yeah. One thing, I was going salmon fishing this day, and I was out putting the rod and all in the car, and Angela says, RTE's on the phone. So I came in and said, yes. I'm going to run something past you. This was some producer of some show, and he said, there's a car coming out at the minute called a Legend, okay? And we would like you to do, put on your suit and come out of it's a non-speaking part, come out of the mist, one legend, and the car coming out of the mist, another legend. Says I, with the greatest respect, say, I'm going salmon fishing. And the water's in good order, and I'm not going to miss it, so we'll have to talk to you later. Okay, good luck. So I went down to the blummery where I fish, because that, you know, that was my pastime. So then, when I come back that night, Angela says, some boy was on the phone from RTE giving out, but who did I think I was in all this? So the next day, the phone rang again, and the boy says, hold on a second, you're the boy who was given out to my wife? Says, I will tell you something. I will not be doing anything about a legend or anything else. Says, I don't ever ring here again, a good man. Click. So, about a year later, there was a guy came along called Bruce Batten. He was a producer for BBC, and he did that profile on me later on, because I like poetry too. Was a big fan of Percy French. So anyway, he said, did you turn down a thing on RTE? So I did. Do you mind me asking why? So I was going salmon fishing. Are you serious? I'm deadly serious. So if anybody's a salmon fisherman, says I, and the water's right, so you know, it's like a magnet. So this boy didn't want to know about me or my salmon fish. He wanted to do this. He says there was about 10 grand involved in that. So I don't give a damn what was involved, says I was going fishing. So I'm allowed to have my own way sometimes. And Bruce Batten did a nice job on that later on. It was nice too. And I met a man then, he's deceased since, a man called Gerard O'Keefe. He was a solicitor in Cantork in North Cork. Very clever man. And I didn't realise at the time I had a yen for poetry. And there was one poem in particular. It was called My Madonna. And it goes something like, I hailed me a woman from the street, shameless but oh so fair. I bade her sit in the model seat, and I painted her sitting there. I hid all trace of her heart unclean, I painted a babe at her breast. I painted her as she might have been, if the worst had been the best. She laughed at my picture and went away, then came with a knowing nod, a connoisseur, and I heard him say, 'Tis Mary, the Mother of God. So I painted a halo round her hair, sold her and took my fee, and she hangs in the church of Saint Hilaire, where you and all may see. It's called My Madonna by Robert Service.
Oh, lovely, Frank, lovely.
Great lovely poem, you know.
And it's the same kind of rhythm. It was a balmy summer evening and a goodly crowd was there. You know, that was so...
Go ahead, go on.
Oh, I don't know the rest. I just made a tax return, 78. But it's the same rhythm.
Aye.
And I love Robert Service.
Aye.
How did you get into Percy French?
O'Keefe came up to visit me and my family. Came up from North Cork. We became friends.
Right.
And he said, I'm going to give you a book of poems that I got when I was 12 years of age by Percy French. And my favourite poem is called Later On. And one of the lines at the end, later on, oh, what many friends have gone. Sweet lips that smiled and loving eyes that shone. From the darkness into light, one by one they've winged their flight. And I know we'll play together later on. You know, and it was a big long poem. It was beautiful.
Percy French stayed in Omagh. Richard Scott told me, because when I moved back here in the early 80s, he was saying we had a night in the golf club by Percy French and Margaret Mitchell sang and Richard Scott sang. And he said that he would stay with the Scott family. But he would, literally, he wouldn't sing for the supper, he would paint for the supper. He used to get, his party trick was to get white dinner dishes, and in those days you had the candles, and he would hold the candle or put hold the plate over the candle and manipulate it and create a cloud effect and a landscape effect. And he said the Scott family had a collection of Percy French plates.
Wow.
You know, and Percy French, he said, a thing I've always remembered, he said, I was born a boy and have remained one ever since.
Well,
Isn't that lovely?
O'Keefe used to say to me, if you lose the cutty or the cub in you,
Yeah.
it's all over.
Isn't it? Yeah.
You know,
It's so true.
and I think at some stage of our lives, that boy still would come out, you know, and the day that goes away, you know, no, it's over. So I know where you're coming from.
Oh, yeah.
But Percy French and O'Keefe used to ring me at all hours of the morning. Would you hear this one? It's called The Thousandth Man. Oh. And I wanted to learn a wee bit more. And then he was the president of a charity organisation, and it was for Friedreich's ataxia. It was a disease that attacked young people between 16. I just wouldn't be exactly sure, but that's what he told me. And he wanted, and he was the president of that, and he wanted me to do a charity show. We did it in North Cork, in his hometown, and a place. It was called Juries. It used to be called the Intercon in Cork. It was called Juries. We did a show there for to raise money for that. And he asked me about my fees. I don't want any money. So it's for charity. So I just paid the band. So we paid the band, and he paid for them to stay in the hotel. I stayed out with him. And he says in the morning, you sure you don't want any money? No, says I, it was for charity, that's it, says I. And he says the band fellas will be ready to go in an hour. So I good enough. He says, you were a panel beater in your day. So I was. I want to show you something. So you come out to this, open the shade, and this old-time Mercedes was on one side, back wheel flat. Would that be any good to you? So I have a look at it. Does it go? Of course it goes. Start her up. We got the wheels blowing up. Ring the boys, he says, and tell them you're making your own way home. So that's what we did. Follow me down to this filling station. He filled it to the neck. And he said, my friend, we'll talk real soon. And he shook my hand, and away I blew in this Mercedes through the checkpoint, and the army and the police were saying, oh ho, what happened to Van? I, don't ask. I, there's no tax, no insurance, nothing. You've any tips? Says I, the band will have them get to them, and away I blew. And I repainted it and did it up, and it was nice, you know.
Was that the burgundy car? Was
Yes.
I remember that car around the town very well.
He gave it to me because I didn't. I didn't. I mean, if it's a charity gig, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
You know, and
That's marvellous, Frank.
I believe, you know, the giving hand never wants. My mother used to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I along the way can help somebody, you know,
Yeah.
and I get a great kick out of making somebody's day, you know.
Great. Yeah,
It
totally.
does.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me anything special, but there are certain things your parents instilled in you, and they still, you know.
Yeah.
And Daddy had one saying, you know, if you're doing something, pay attention to small detail.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
things like that.
I remember your late father, because we were both born in Gortbridge Park. I'm not sure if you were born there, but both reared in Gortbridge Park. Your father had an old motorbike and sidecar.
Yes.
And the whole park were allowed to sit on it. He never said, get off it. You know, the cubs come out of the garden. We were around it like flies, because I was amazed at this, like a sidecar attached to a motorbike. And that's my earliest memories, Frank, of being around your house when we were kids.
Well, I remember that too. We would go down fishing, and this night he had caught a few salmon and put them into the sidecar along with me, and pulled up outside Paddy Brown's. That's the milling company now. And took the 2 fish inside and came out, and there was a sort of a tarpaulin over the bit, and this bag of crisps and this mineral came in onto that, and I could hear the cackle and cajon in the place. I was quite happy sitting in the dark with this crisps and the mineral, and then on the motorbike, started up and away we blew.
Wow.
And I can see that, and it was over in number 9, Gortrush Park, and he had to have a plank to take it up over the wall, and so it wouldn't fall over. And Mum wanted to get into the sidecar, and Pop says, no, I'm not taking you to the sidecar. That was a bit of a row.
Well,
But I remember that as well, you know.
Right. And what's your earliest memories of growing up in Omagh, Frank? Have you anything that stands out? Your school days and various things, have you?
It was called the rope walk back then, and you come in Charlatton's garage, and if you moved up then, Brogan's was on the left hand side, and they kept pigs, and there was 2 small bungalows. One, Claire Hannigan owned the second one. Mum and Dad had rented the first one, and they had got me this colouring book, and for some reason I went down to where the pigs were, and I was climbing up, and I got caught on the barbed wire. The colouring book fell in, and the pigs were eating the colouring book. It started to rain, and I was shrieking, and my mother came down and got me off the barbed wire up to the house. Where's the colouring book? Say the pigs ate the colouring book. Oh, but I remember this now. This might sound strange. When we moved down to number 23, which was a 4-bedroom, and Mum would have had the apron on, like all mothers, in the morning. She was a cook, she was a cleaner, she made dinner, she washed clothes, she ironed, you know, and the apron came off last thing at night, and not a word about it. And a biggie for us was an onion and tomato pie and homemade chips. And I can smell it yet. And that was a big thing, because back then, like you would know, Donald, I mean, 8 of a family.
Yeah.
And Dad was only breadwinner. Mum had to keep the house and all the rest. Your mum and pop was the same.
Yeah.
Your dad worked in the gasworks.
Right, yeah.
And him and Daddy used to have a pint up on
Mickey Garner's.
MJ's on a Friday night. And Mum was always, and one thing I remember, I was sitting at the table doing homework. Now, I was no scholar. I had hand skills, but the other end wasn't good. I remember Mum at the sink, apron on, and her peeling carrots or scraping carrots and sorting them out. And she turned around, cut a bit of the carrot and handed it to me, and I remember the carrots were sweet as a nut. And the next thing, Mum started to dry her hands, and Daddy came up the path and came in to the kitchen at the back. And Mum put her arms round Dad, and he put her arms around her, and they hugged. And I was an old cub sitting. Wow, isn't that nice? I remember that. I can see it yet. And that was affectionate, you know. And I thought, whoa, that's nice. I remember the carrots. I don't think carrots are taste the same today.
They don't, Frank? No, no,
Oh,
not at all.
So, I remember there was 48 houses in Gortrush,
Yeah,
and I could name every one of them.
there you are. Okay. I bet you could.
I remember it well.
I
Yes.
can remember things better then than I could remember last week. And I don't know what it is about that. It was your early childhood and the influence it has on you. That was Collins's house you moved into.
Yes.
'Cause we were 22 and you were 23. And I remember you coming across the park right enough.
And Harry Rogers. I think Harry worked in Nestle for a while. And Molly Rogers. Molly, I used to go to get over to the shop for Woodbine for Molly. And Peggy McQuaid was the bus driver.
That's right. Molly Rogers was one of the few people in Gortrush Park who had a TV, Frank. We used to get into her house to watch TV in the very early days.
Well, I used to get into Jack Torney's to watch Bronco Lane on a Saturday morning.
Drinking his sarsaparilla.
But,
Wow.
you know,
Innocent days.
looking back, you know, it was harmless and they were good days, make no mistake, you know. Most children then growing up, we didn't have much, but I think there was a lot of love and affection from our parents, and the whole world wasn't going at a fast pace that it is today. The world went and got itself in one hell of a hurry this last few years, you know. Back then it was, and Charlie Gormley up the park, remember Charlie Gormley? And Brian Dyson, your man McBurney.
That's right.
Do you remember years ago, I don't know if you remember this, Donald, these people came round to the door and they wanted Mum to sign this thing. Martin McDonough and the wife had applied for a house on the corner where, was it McChrystal's used to, remember that? And the place was objecting, a lot of people were objecting to Martin McDonough moving in. Mum chased him, and so did Patsy Freeland, Mrs. Freeland next door, chased him away, and how dare you. So anyway, on Christmas Eve night, Mum thought she heard somebody in the backyard, etc., etc. And the next morning, Mrs. Freeland knocked at her door and says, "Did you hear something last night?" She says, "Funny it did." Oh. Mum went out to the coal house and the coal bunker was half full. Mrs. Freeland's coal bunker was half full as well. So in the ways of the night, Martin and some of his friends had slipped in and put in bags of coal for Mrs. Freeland and for Mammy because they found out that they didn't object.
Oh, there you are.
Martin McDonough, Martin would have got out of his bed for you. We've done anything, you know. It's just a different type, you know.
Different type, different people.
Remember that? And then Angela was talking to Martin's wife. Martin passed away there some time back, you know.
Well, do you remember Jackie Adams then?
Jackie Adams drummed with the Pebbles.
Did he in the early days, did he?
Jackie Adams was way ahead of the posse. God love him. He came and his sister was Phyllis, married an Englishman, and when Phyllis phoned me to the phone box, we didn't have a phone, down to the phone box at the bottom, somebody came up and says, "There's somebody on the phone." That was Phyllis. She says, "Listen, I believe Jack's going to join the group." I said, "Ah, yes. I'm going to buy him a kit and send it over." I said, "Good enough." So a week later, the kit landed. Jackie was rehearsing for 2 weeks, the numbers, and his first gig was in their Counties Hotel in Lifford. Jackie Adams said, "That thing, you know."
Yeah, just natural rhythm, yeah.
Just a natural eye, you know,
Yeah.
it was something to just say, "That thing." Wow.
Yeah.
Jackie Adams. And he died sitting in Johnny Gallagher's bar in Main Street.
Yeah.
Jackie used to come in the morning there, have a few, and he would put his hands down and his head down and up in the corner, not bothering anybody. And wake up after a while, and that's it. But this time he didn't wake up. And I was in New York at the time, and I phoned Angela every day. She says, Jackie Adams passed away sitting in the bar. God, oh. But a superb talent.
Yeah. Were you involved in the Pantos as well?
No.
No?
No.
Yeah.
I remember, you remember Paddy Mossy and what did you call the other guy?
Paddy Laird, was it? There's Paddy Laird.
Mickey Gormley.
Aye, but Paddy Mossy and Dickie Kennedy.
Yeah.
They did this thing, and my father-in-law, George Rogers, had organised different spotlights, and he was an electrician. And the two boys, Dickie Kennedy and Paddy Mossy, were apparently stranded at sea in this raft. And it was, you nearly swore with the lights and all this, and the lightning and the thunder, and the sound effects. It was amazing. You just swore the two boys were on the stage. And I don't think they got the credit they deserved back then, you know. It was, I always said to somebody, if Walt Disney had came to Omagh, there was that many characters, they didn't need no script, just start the camera rolling. I mean, when you went into Paddy Mossy's shop, I mean, it was a pantomime on its own, never mind on the stage. And you had some other guy was called Mickey Morgan. Mickey Morgan used to dance, watch the feet outside Sam McConnell's
Soft Shoe Shuffle.
chip shop.
Remember that in the wee dog?
Yes, all these characters.
Yeah.
And were amazing.
Peter McGovern.
Just when you mentioned that, Peter McGovern was a storeman in Aikens, and I was a cub serving me time. And Peter McGovern was something else. And then there was a great, Peter was telling this story, that one evening the knock came to the door, and these two people came, and Peter said, "Can I help you?" They said, "Dr. Bernardo's home." My God, he says, "That's great, I didn't know he was away." I thought, wow.
Talk about a put down.
Very quick. Very, very quick.
And then somebody was asking Peter about some neighbour of his. He says, "How's the neighbour doing?" "I'll tell you how he's doing," he says. "He wound up feeding the cuckoo and the clock. That's how he's doing."
Oh, dear.
And Peter McGovern was a pantomime 24/7.
Oh, he was.
And had a great talent, you know. And Paddy McElhinney was the same, you know. Place full of characters. And they never really got the recognition that they deserved.
But I think almost full of that. You'll never get above your station at Omagh, because people will always keep you back down again. It doesn't matter where you come from. You know, when you people like Artie Bitlin and people like yourselves and all the names that come out of this town, when they're back in Omagh, they had to be the person in Omagh that they were.
Yeah. I enjoyed my stage thing, but I was always, sometimes on the stage I was thinking, I hope the river's in order for tomorrow, you know. That's true. And then people, when Angela would be in the town there, and they would say, "Does your husband still have the black hair and the sideburns?" And she says, "Hold on a minute, you know, do you know what age my husband is? People of this thing, I should still be black hair, sideburns.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute here."
Yeah.
But people are I don't know what, fickle or strange, or have their own ideas about things, you know, and it's not vindictive, they have a perception of, but
well, people don't want things to change, maybe.
Maybe that's
because
right.
if things change, you're growing older.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. You're a great aficionado of gospel music. You like gospel tunes?
Yes.
The old time gospel or the modern?
I was asked one Sunday in church if I would do a gospel song next week. your own choice. Bring the guitar. I said, okay. So I landed down to Mountjoy, and there was an Elvis song that we had been doing in the group. It's called Help Me. Lord, help me walk another mile just one more.
The Gatlin brothers, yeah.
I like this. So I rehearsed it, and that morning the Reverend said, listen, blah, blah, blah. So I done Help Me. Wow. A lovely feeling. And then they said, well, next Sunday you wouldn't mind doing another one. So I said, no. So a song I like is Amazing Grace. So I did Amazing Grace. Love that, you know. And then How Great Thou Art, the Elvis version, did it in church. And there was a lad there, you probably know him, Ray Liggett. Ray had the Jaws harp. And this particular, it was an evening service, remember that, it was an evening service. And Jonathan, the Reverend, said, will you do your song? So whenever, give me the wire. And Ray was sitting in the front with some other people. The place was, an evening service was packed. And the service went on, and then they introduced me, and I put on the guitar. And there's no microphone, I just sang it there, the acoustic. And when I was just finished the last note, Ray Liggett shot up on his feet, and he was applauding. So the rest of the congregation followed him. And that was the first time Jonathan told me ever that there was a standing ovation in church. Oh, and then he got up and he said, how am I going to follow that, you know?
Oh, wow.
So, I like to do an odd gospel song, you know, that's, you know, because Elvis did an odd one. He did actually a whole album, but just now and again, you know, you don't want to be putting it down people's throats. So just now and again, in a certain situation,
Yeah.
I would throw one in or whatever,
If it
you
suits,
know.
if it suits,
Yeah, if it suits,
yeah,
yes, that's right.
You do Why Me, the Christopherson one? Why Me, Lord?
Why me, no, that, do you ever hear J.D. Sumner doing that?
No.
Why me, Lord? And he was down all in his boots. Elvis stopped the whole show, and Elvis put his head and he says, I want you to listen to J.D. Sumner. Why me, Lord? What did I ever do to deserve you? You know, and you were sitting on the hairs in the back of your neck. Wow, listen to that. Christopherson did a good version. But when you hear J.D. Sumner, nearly a tone below.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Christopherson did a great version of Help Me.
Yes.
And Jesus Was a Capricorn, I think, on one of those albums.
Well, there's two lads I want to say is thanks to. They recorded. I meant to bring it, but I couldn't find the CD. One was Whiskey River by Willie Nelson. The other one was Help Me. And Chris Clark and a lad from Enniskillen called Barry Horsfield, they did the recording and writing of it was. And Jerry Young Coyle, as I called him, played Whiskey River on Radio 5.
Did it? Right.
Well, for fair dues, I rang him up. So I was Young Coyle about the house. Who's on the phone? Says I tell him it's Chisum. Well, says I, Young Coyle, how are you keeping? He says, you always called me Young Coyle. I want you to do me a favour. I'm going to send you down this if you can. Will you give it not a problem? So 2 days later, he kept his word. But the version of Help Me, the Chris Clark, he played piano, and Barry was, they produced the thing between them, and it was something I could be proud of. So if I get a chance, I'll hook it out, and maybe you'll give it a play.
Well, surely, we'd love to, yeah. Would you, yeah.
So,
Lovely.
I like that, you know.
Willie Nelson recorded a couple of great albums with his sister, just Willie on guitar and the sister on piano, old-time gospel music, like I'll Fly Away, and just that old 1920s, 30s.
Well, there was a gospel one that Willie, Jonathan asked me, he says, there's a Willie Nelson song, it's a gospel thing. Will you do it? So I listened, never heard it before. I listened to Willie's versions as I, morning, noon and night to get it right.
Aye.
And did it that Sunday in the church. It was nice.
So it wasn't a troublemaker, was it?
No, I did a couple of Woolies. I do a lot of Woolly songs in the group too. A big fan of Woolly.
Okay.
Woolly's 80, I think he's 86, or maybe more, still performing.
Yeah. Solid guy, and solid performance. It's
And I watched, and then Barry Horsfield said to me, listen, there's one song of Willie Nelson I would love if you would do it for me. I said, what's it called? She's Gone. And he showed me the video, black and white. Willie's down in the field, and it shows you the wee girl and the wife coming running down. And Willie played it, and I saw him doing it then, and I think was it on, what do you call your man, the piano player, Jules Holland.
Oh, right.
He did, the sisters played piano, a lovely touch. Willie played the guitar, She's Gone. Oh, so I did the Willie version because Barry wanted me to do it, so I did it for him.
Yeah.
And it worked out really nice, you know.
Yeah.
But Willie Nelson's,
Great CD album called Spirit, and it's just all acoustic gospel tunes.
right.
Beautiful, and She Is Gone is on it, and it is.
I can't remember that one. I did it in the church. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But Willie and Willie and what do you call him? Merle Haggard, before he passed away, they did I showed you a TV thing where the two boys were sitting chatting and doing a bit. And what I liked about Willie and them, there's no big deal. You know, Willie comes in and what he has to do, he'll do it. And there's one I do in the group. There'll be no teardrops tonight. And this is a way back. Willie Nelson's voice is unique. I mean, first word, straight away, that's Willie, you know.
Yeah, you know, and that.
Yeah.
But that's the difference between I think now and the singers of that generation. And you know, you were talking about the show bands, Frank. They playing for 5 hours at a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Young bands aren't doing that now. You come through it. It was the hard graft and grind and learning your trade.
Well, I remember the first time I met the Dixies. The Pebbles were playing relief and the A&F and the Royal Arms of different bands. We do from 10 to 12. Then the band came on 12 to 2. And this night we were booked to play in the A&F, a great hall for sound. The time the stage was at the back, lovely long hall. The stage was about 2 foot high, semicircular, perfect for sound. Oh, great sound. And the Dixies were booked to play, and we landed in. And Desi Stewart, the drummer, he couldn't come down from Belfast. He was at some meeting, he couldn't make it. So I went downstairs and I met Joe McCarthy for the first time, and I explained the situation. Says, we have no drummer, and whatever our fee is, says, I'll pay you for. Tell you what, he says, I'll be up in 10 minutes when I get a bite to eat, and we'll take it from there. So that night, Joe McCarthy sat in. Wow. What a talented man. So the Pebbles really sounded good that night.
Unreal.
And years later, when I was with the Royal, Joe McCarthy and me shared a house out in Whitehall. It was 15 punts a week for the rent of this house. And I learned a lot from Joe, great character.
Yeah.
And one night, we were doing live at 3 with Derek.
Derek Davis was there. Derek.
No, Derek Davis was it, and Thelma Mansfield. They were done live at 3. And this, we were doing it. I was doing, I think it was Can't Help Believing, and Joe McCarthy they were chatting, and there was some woman had brought down all these exotic birds. And Joe being Joe was standing with the drumsticks, and again, when nobody was looking, Joe would go over and poke at the birds to get them squealing. And Derek Davis finally caught it on. Says, Joe McCarthy, will you leave the birds alone? But
Oh dear.
the Dixies, then that night I saw the Dixies. They were superb, professional. We finished, the band landed out on the stage. There was no 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, this testing the mics. The band were all sitting. Joe crowded them in, and the way the boys checked the mics, and I always do it because it was great. Class. Not a sound. The next thing, Val Doonigan's Walk Tall was in the charts. And just to hear the count, 1, 2, 3, Walk Tall. Wow. This band had everything. Everything they did was really perfection. The Dixies were one of the best. You had the Melody Aces, and you had the Plottermen, you had the Freshmen, the Polka Dots. They were all really good bands, really good bands. But then there were some bands who had brass sections, and I think the brass just blew the notes to get rid of them, That's true.
Oh, deadly. Okay. Well,
And then we had a character in the band too, and this night we went to, funny, the west of Ireland, it never worked. And we were down to this place, and the guy who was playing the tenor sax at the time, a man called Patsy Gormley, great talent. And he said halfway through, you know something? He says, we're only annoying them.
oh God.
And he was so right, because
Yeah.
I would say some of them people in certain places, they didn't know Elvis was alive, never mind dead, and they really didn't want to know.
Oh, goodness, oh dear. Well, would you do it all again, Frank, would you?
Pardon me?
Would you do it all again?
Yes, I would. I would do it all again, because as I said, from what I have heard over the years, there was a lot of people got a lot of pleasure out of what I was doing, man, woman and child, so
Yeah, good.
that was nice, nice to look back. And then my daughter said to me, Dad, we rehearsed on last night, we always rehearse on a Tuesday because we're in Broderick's on this Saturday night. We always try to have a new programme when we go back, not the same, to be fair to the people who come to hear, like to keep the programme fresh. She says, Dad, there's a whole lot of people saying nice things about you. Saying that's good enough. She says, do you want to hear? No, says I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear people's comments about me, good or bad. We'll just leave it. If you're telling me they're good, that's good enough. We'll leave it there.
All right.
So,
I suppose one of the better things about getting older is you care less about the good opinions of others, anyway.
Well, my mother used to say to me, I'm sure she said it, different mothers said it to different cubs or whatever, you're not surely going out like that. What do you mean, Mum? What's wrong? She says, what'll people say? So what people do you mean, Mrs. Gormley or Mrs. McQuaid's going to come down and say to you, you're not letting your son out like that? So Mum, to put it mildly, say, I don't give a shit what they think about me. Says I'm not doing it any harm. And that was it, because how can I put it? I suppose they were thinking their heart was in the right place, but all children and teenagers have their own way of thoughts, There's a great poem too by a man called Cathal Cabran. It's called Your Children Are Not Your Children. You want to look that one up. Cathal Cabran is spelled with a K, and Cabran spelled with a K as well.
Right.
And I think it's called Your Children. And a very deep poem, but it tells the thing, they have their own thoughts and their own minds. You cannot visit them. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, the kids today do their own thing, and you've got to let them, you only can guide them.
Yeah.
And you can't, that's as far as it can go. You can instill certain qualities in them, hopefully.
Yes.
But it's not a guarantee, and they'll go their own path. Because you and me, Donald, and we all went our own path eventually. Your mum would give out, Dad would give out. But you thought that, we thought we knew it all, We knew a bit. We know a lot more now.
Well, that's the thing, yeah.
And we've probably forgotten a lot more too. But,
Hopefully, yeah.
That's the benefits of getting older.
Yeah. Jack and I interviewed a guy, I don't remember who he was, but he said, he was quite elderly, and he says, I spent the first half of my life looking forward, he says, in the second half, looking back. I suppose we all do, don't we?
Well, it was Colin Sands, the great songwriter from folk singer from County Down. I was chatting with him, I'd written a wee thing, and I said, I would never sing this in front of my father. I said, don't know what it was. I would never recite poems or sing in front of him. And he says, yeah, he says, you're like a ship, and your parents are the anchors. And when your parents go, that's the time that you can become really yourself, because you're not kind of waiting to hear their opinions, and I think there was a truth in that,
Well, this might sound strange, but I miss my children. I miss being able to have them on my knee, them hugging their dad. I would look back and I would think about that, and there'd be a lump in my throat as big as a spud, But people said, oh, sure, once they grow up, you worry far more about them when they're bigger. Gareth's 51, and I'd be thinking about him on the farm. I'd say, listen, son, you take care of that farm, And then I'd be telling Karina, listen, do this and that. And you get into this. I have these days that have myself driven crazy thinking, are they going to be okay? And I can't protect them the way I used to be able to do,
Yeah. It is what it is, yeah.
And I think that's true. Like Rachel's buying a house. She's 40 this year. Maria's waking up in the middle of the night. Like, she shouldn't. She's buying a house. How's she going to be able to afford it? She's living in Scotland. But it's that the parental thing.
Yeah, it is. And I can look back and think, my mum was right. Mums, to me, mothers are very astute. Somebody once said, us fellas think that we're fairly fly and fairly cute. Somebody said, will I tell you something? You see, women, they're 8 years ahead of us guys.
Absolutely.
They certainly are.
We all agreed.
Make no mistake.
That's a lovely way to end it.
Lovely. Frank, it's been fantastic talking to you. Great chat. Thank you, sir.
Listen, just many thanks, Donald and Declan, for having me here, allowing me the time.
Great.
And it's been a pleasure.
Lovely. Good.
And thank you again.
I'll see you in Brodick some night. I'm away this Saturday, unfortunately, but next time you're in the West, going to have a listen to you. It's good to see you still out and about and enjoying it, Frank.
I just want to say thanks to my wife Angela and my daughter Karina, my son David, Gavin, my grandchildren Connor, Katie, over in Wales, Gareth, Victoria, Fran, Amy, and Peter Davis. Many thanks.
Thank you, Frank.
Again.
Thanks very much indeed. Appreciate it.
'Tis many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.